Thank you for being here. I am Jorge, and this talk was initially proposed by Claire and I. Claire is an actual certified search and rescue expert, but she actually transitioned and now she's doing a master's in environmental sciences in Malta. So that's why she couldn't come here today. But I'll try to make a good job. And let's start first by asking a question about who here likes hiking. Oh, pretty much everybody likes hiking. Who could not like hiking? I don't like hiking. It's not that I don't like hiking, but I wouldn't choose to hike. A friend told me, let's go have a hike, and they make all the plan, and I just have to show up. Then I will show up and probably have a good time, but I wouldn't just choose it on my own. This is a picture from one of my colleagues. I work at a company called Rootly. We do on-call and incident management. But notice that she is logged off. We are not having her do on-call in the Himalayas. She's just having a good time. So don't worry about it. I do more of cycling, and I even need no nature. I need the road bike. That's the kind of things that I do. I'm also the author of the Linux Foundation Introduction to Backstage course. I spent about 3 years in the platform engineering space, and I did a lot of backstage work ever since the very beginning. And I'm also a certified sommelier, but I don't drink almost at all these days. So I had to find a new hobby. And that means that I now do a lot of fiction writing. And I'm not referring to my marketing job, okay? I'm talking about, I also write short stories and I'm writing a novel as well. So that's the kind of fiction that I write. But let's get back to the objective of this talk. Why are we sitting in this beautiful afternoon today? What I'm going to do today is to go through how search and rescue experts manage incidents, because it is quite different than the incidents that we're used to doing. Because in here, what is at stake is that somebody might die if they take too long, or so the stakes are really different than what we're used to doing. And there is no direct mapping between the incidents that we are used to dealing with and the things that they manage. So I'm not going to try to do like a big metaphor on how things happen here and there. Of course, there's going to be some comments, but the idea here is to provide like a new, fresh perspective, and maybe you can go out of this room with some new ideas. Who knows? So the first stage is something that is not special, right? You don't need to leave your house to get a page at 3 a.m. We have all been paged at night. We have all been threatened by your partner. Oh, not again. Are you sure? Maybe you should quit, or maybe you should find a new whatever. But this time, the page that you get is an avalanche alert. So this is when things get interesting, right? You are not getting paged because some log went off. You're getting paged because there's an avalanche somewhere, and maybe it is near a campsite. So there's people who may be in danger. And that is really different than being paged because some service is down or some dashboards are not fine. Some quick facts about avalanches is that asphyxiations account for 70% of deaths during an avalanche. And more shocking is that after 75 minutes under the snow, the survival rates drop below 30%. That means that time is really important for an avalanche. However, let's make a reality check on outdoor rescue. And it is that during a normal rescue operation, it's going to take us from 24 to 36 hours to perform a rescue. So we're talking about, so you're telling me that somebody is very unlikely to survive after 35, after so few minutes, but it's going to take you 24 hours to do an operation. So how does it work? There's a dissonance here. So the secret is that given that avalanches are so catastrophic for rescue, there are special protocols and special ways in which rescue experts operate so they can actually save people. So how do they do that? And first, I want to emphasize that these kind of alerts are quite rare. They are very unlikely. However, given that they are high risk and they are so urgent, professional search and rescue operators train for this kind of incident every year, even though they might encounter an avalanche a few times in their lifetime. But they have to train for it every year. They have to exercise these emergency protocols constantly in order to know that. And here we start to see how can they manage to compress a 24-hour operation into something that can save somebody under half an hour. it's because they have some protocol, they have training, they have something there that they can pull from to work. And let's start by digging into what is that. The beginning of everything is the incident command system. The incident command system is a protocol. It's a standard that was established in the 70s by the wildfire management in the US. And it became a standard in 2004 by the federal government in the US again, in the aftermath of 9/11, which is also a testament of how difficult it is to establish a standard. There had to happen, something really huge had to happen for a standard national-wide to become a thing. It has several components. One of the first ones is common terminology. That means that rescuers don't have to argue about whether the avalanche is SEV 0 or SEV 1 or SEV 2 or whether SEVs is a useful categorization or not at all. They have a very specific way of referring to injuries or victims or the placements of bodies or the locations. They don't have to discuss this. They are beyond this point. They are ready to act because they have a common framework of terminologies. Then the standard also establishes a modular organization, which allows teams to be constituted and grow very fast dynamically. That means that they can grow and degrow depending on the situation and the scale of how things evolve, because it has a built-in plugin hierarchy, which means that they have a section leader who knows which roles to assign, because they also have predefined roles, much less in incident response is described. There's like different kind of roles, but they have like very strict categorizations. And once you are assigned a role, you know that you have to do this and not the other thing, because you have to trust that your teammates are going to do the other roles, even though you're capable of doing the other roles. You only do your role, and you know that you don't have to do anything else. And that allows them to grow the scale, because if you have read recent news from last year, wildfires can grow in scale extremely fast. So they have to be able to react and scale adequately across borders even, and they have to be able to do it quickly. The other thing that caught my attention is that the standard defines instant action planning. So that means that when they show up to a place to act, there's also a way of acting that is defined in the standard. They don't show up and say, oh, let's figure it out. They know already what to do. So that's something we're going to dig into, like what do they do? And another thing that is also interesting to me, that was like, oh, that's interesting. At least for me, it was like, they have a whole protocol for information management. Even though we're talking about life and death and rescuers risking their lives to save somebody, there's still a big insistence of gathering metrics and tracking information on what went down, how did we do, because it is important that the next rescue operation is performed better with less risk. And if there was something that went wrong, how can we correct it so it doesn't happen again in the next operation? So let's talk about instant action planning. And to do that, I'm going to go into the micro level, which is what does an SREday do once they reach the scene? And when they reach the scene and they find an injured person, let's say you finally find it in the field, what do? You freak out, and then there's a ghost here. And what do? Thankfully, given that they have these standard protocols in their minds because they went through a lot of rigorous training before they can act as a rescuer, they have this certification called the Wilderness First Responder that teaches them actually a bunch of acronyms and initialisms that are like mental cheat codes on things to do depending on the circumstances, like the ABCD. Is airway, breathing, circulation, disability, are things to check when you find a person. Or SCTM is skin color, temperature, and moisture, are things to check on the people that you find, so you can, like, if you, instead of being shocked by the discovery of somebody being injured or potentially dead, you overcome the shock and avoid mistakes by just following protocols and discarding options faster than being just shocked. But before you even get to the scene where there is a person injured that may need assistance, you have to plan. How do you even find a person in so many hectares of wilderness? So to do that, they have a whole mission planning in which they become briefed. They do this whole situational awareness in which they use heavy usage of the map, of course, And for them, maps are like safety artifacts because it's what's going to let them know how do we get to the point where there are maybe people. Can we find a path? Because during an avalanche, the terrain also changes. Maybe they are familiar with the mountain range they're going to explore, but given an avalanche changes things, the path, we have to analyze what is the safest route for responders to go through. And also understand what could be obstacles and where can we find refuge, because maybe another storm is going to come in. So we need to be able to make sure that rescuers have a way to be safe as well during the operation. Another thing that they have to keep under control during the situational awareness phase of the planning is contrasting conflicting evidence that they have. Because to find people in the wilderness is not easy. All they have as information is witnesses' accounts. There was somebody who saw a camping van driving 12 hours ago. Oh, yeah, I saw them down that path. That's all they have as a clue. And from there, they have to gather a story. Maybe they get a report from a telco operator that there were cell phones in this sector. And from there, they have to start planning, okay, how can we reduce the scope of this search? And that's how they start envisioning a plan. Once they have a plan, they go to the next part, which involves the real-time tracking. That depends absolutely on having performed a plan. But even the most perfectly planned thing is unpredictable. Once you hit the ground, you don't know how things are going to look like, because you thought there would be a path here, but feel all the trees fell. There's so much debris that you cannot cross this space anymore. Rescuers have to constantly share their location, share their status, how things are going from the field. And they also have very clear communication channels with the incident command center. That means that they don't have to deal with, oh, I sent you an email, oh, what I thought you were going to communicate over Slack over this. They have these very clear communication channels. They have codes to know what to say in a very specific way, so there's no confusion, so there's no redundancy of work, so there's no way that two responders end up searching the same area, they find each other, and they are like just wasting time. So once we have this background, let's get back to business, which is avalanche rescue. What is so special about avalanche rescue, and how do they compress the time to actually manage to rescue somebody? And this is the interesting part, and it's that the rescue is organized in waves. And we're going to elaborate on what are those waves. And the other part is that they have clean deployment strategies. So the waves. The first wave is called the rapid recovery, and it is executed by a specific team that is called the strike team. And what they do is to zigzag through the mountain super fast. They are equipped with special sensors. What they do to find survivors that are buried under the snow is to track transmitters, because nowadays most people that go hiking have some kind of device on them, a cell phone, some kind of GPS. That's how they find people who might be buried, is they have this sensor that just keeps looking for signals. And once they have a point in which there's like a signal concentration emitting the signals, what they do is they probe the snow, see if there's resistance, and they start digging. And if they find a person under the snow, they make a super quick assessment, and they don't treat the person. There's a team immediately behind them who treats the person, does a triage assessment, and they immediately keep going up the mountain. Because as I mentioned earlier, the time frame for people who are buried is very short. So they have to prioritize finding all the people who are buried. And the people who have the equipment to find buried people have to keep moving and keep moving and keep moving as fast as possible through the mountain. So that's why they do the zigzag, because they split the mountain range in bands to go up the mountain, and they don't stop to treat the injured. Oh, there was a slide for that. So they delegate, and they keep moving and keep moving and keep moving. That's the fastest track, the first wave. Then comes the second wave. A few moments after the first wave goes, the second wave starts their search. And these people it's a triage team. They go a little bit slower because they are looking for clues, and they're starting to treat non-buried injured people, which to me sounds crazy. Like in the first team is walking so fast that they see somebody injured there. but they won't stop for them. They're just like, sorry, mate, bye. And they just pass because that's not their priority, because they have to trust that their teammates are immediately after. They're going to take care of them. Their priorities has to be to take care of the people who are buried. But the triage team actually goes for the people who are not buried, and they not even treat them yet, because as you can imagine, a lot of these injuries cannot be treated on the spot. They can give them the first aid treatments, but most of the time what they can do is perform a medical assessment. And what they do is to mark the spots with flags that are either red, yellow, or black. And they also look for clues, because it is not easy to find people in the wilderness, in the snow, with all these conditions. So they will plant as well these blue flags. If they find, for example, a scarf, a glove, or some indication that there might be people here that we haven't found, because in this stage it's still quite fast. So they have to still look for people fast, because now there's going to be a third wave, which is the slow recovery, which is going to be like the really intense, many hours, people doing the very difficult task of extracting the victims from the site, which might include exhuming people who were buried under the snow and extracting the people who were injured so they can be treated and be taken to the ambulances so they can be fully treated, provided the hyper wraps to people who are in need for them throughout the path of the mountain who were found along the way. There's another search that is finer in more detail around the areas where they found evidence that there might be people, because that's why they do the flagging, because there's going to be another more throughout search in these areas. They also have a whole methodology on how to perform a very throughout search once there's more time. And once we have covered, like the really critical cases are already taken care of. So that's for the waves. Now, in terms of the clean deployment strategies, one of the two parts is they have a single entry point, which means that everyone goes through the path that the strike team opened, which means that there's like a safety path. There's a safe path to follow, and they all follow the same path. And this is for safety reasons, for compliance reasons, to keep everyone safe, to prevent new people to join a disaster area by mistake. Like it's to keep everything under control, safe, and to keep evidence in place. And the other component of the clean deployment, which to me is one of the most interesting parts, is that part of the plan of an avalanche rescue is that they plan for fatigue. They know that this is a very tiring and taxing operation, so they already plan thinking that they will have to make rotations, they will have to keep checking in with the rescuers, and knowing that it's just a very physically and emotionally taxing labor. So they need to be aware of that and plan for shifts, and knowing that maybe they have to replace a rescuer before they thought. So they have to keep calling people and have that ready. And once the avalanche rescue is done, it's not done, because this is such a difficult task that it can be traumatic. It can cause a post-stress reaction in the rescuers. That's why there's this post-incident support that includes psychological support in the rescuers. And that is also because most search and rescue experts are volunteers. All of this is not paid. They are just doing it as a volunteering act. And that's why these organizations acknowledge the need for recovery. They won't call you for an avalanche and then the next day be like, hey, there's another emergency. Want to just hang out with us and rescue more people? They give you time off, and they know how to treat you, because a lot of this comes from empathy, from the fact that they have gone through this as well. So in conclusion, how does search and rescue compare to site reliability engineering incident management? That's something that would be great to chat. And given that the format of the conference is smaller, it's something I'd love to talk about just one-on-one, because I think there's a lot of details that we could talk about, but we don't have time. But for me, there are some standouts. And one of them is the fact that they have standard terminology and practices. And I think that this allows them to have a lot of plasticity on how they operate. And the other thing is the waves concept. I think this is something super interesting that maybe there's a way of mapping somehow. And something that came to my mind is I work for Rootly, which is this incident management. And of course, we have an AI resolution bot that is trying to find root causes automatically. So that to me clicked in a way. It could be like a first wave kind of thing. Like we have this strike theme that suggests you things. It's not a throw. It's not a thing that's going to do everything for you, but it reduces the search space for you. I don't know. There could be an interesting concept of waves on incident management could be mapped or planned around. And then the post incident recovery or support is also interesting. It's a concept that I don't think it's that explored because, of course, SREs are not volunteers for a reason, but there should be some more thought about how we recover from incidents other than just nothing. Yes. Thank you. That's all I have to say.